Good morning. Good morning. Hopefully, y'all have had a wonderful day and been filled with a lot of great information and have some wonderful takeaways. And I know that after you listen to this session, you will have plenty more to add to your toolbox. But I want to go ahead and get started and introduce you to this wonderful moderator who I had the pleasure of. She actually was my former CEO, so this is very special for me. But it is Danielle Frazier. She is our moderator for today. And Danielle is Special Assistant to the City Manager for Workforce Development of the City of Charlotte. We also have Janine Bryant. She is Executive Director of Community Building Initiative. LaShawn Carter, right next to her, Governing Board Co-Chair of AALAC. Elizabeth McKee, Executive Director of Leadership Charlotte. Harold Rice, founder of Black Social Capital Initiative, and Crystal Joy, Managing Director of Lee Institute American Leadership Forum. I will pass the mic over to Danielle.
Well, thank you very much, Shamia. I think Shamia was more my boss than I think I was hers. So good morning, everyone. Already it's been a great day, and I think this is our third session, and I'm so excited. Again, I'm Danielle Frazier, and I am your moderator for this session of Elevating Leadership. And we have some amazing leaders up here on this panel that are going to talk to you about leadership and their organizations and the programs that they lead. And so I'm so excited. I just want to jump right into this, you all. And I know we wanted this to be conversational and as organic as possible. And so if there are things that you want to say, just chime in. We've got 3 mics, so you all will have to share. But I would love to just jump in. And any intro that maybe we weren't able to cover in the first question, if you all could just give a quick intro of yourselves. But really want to start off with asking you if you could tell us more about yourself, your program, and its purpose, mission, and goals. And we're just going to start with you, Janine, and go right down the line.
Thank you, Danielle. I'm so excited to be here with you all. I've seen so many people that I know. I am the Director of Community Building Initiative, and there I am. So if you see me on LinkedIn, I don't look anywhere near this good. Kevin, who just took our pictures, is the one that did that magic. There he is. Part of the work that CBI is doing, and in the role that I'm in, is really looking for how do we equip our leaders to face racial equity head forward. And why is that an issue? 25 years ago, this organization was founded at a catalyst moment, and this organization was seeking to embody the courage that it took to address racial equity issues after a police-involved incident. For many years, this organization was doing a program called LDI. There may be LDI graduates in this room. Anybody? There you go. Hey, how you doing? And we also launched a program called LU40. Any LU40 graduates in the room? Hey, there you are. And so this program has trained, equipped, and in many ways disseminated a lot of the top-level leadership in Charlotte. And in this role, I was also asked to make sure that we're evaluating for accountability. So I'll be speaking more about that as we go down the line.
Good morning still, everyone. My name is LaShawn Carter, and I serve as the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer for Mecklenburg County. And I'm also the co-chair of the African American Leadership Academy of Charlotte. And one thing that's important to note about the African American Leadership Academy is that it was founded originally 25 years ago in Columbus, Ohio. And it is now in 3 cities and beginning to planned for City 4. Charlotte is City 3 in that, and we are going into our second cohort. The entire principle of the African American Leadership Academy is built around 3 pillars. It's to equip, empower, and advance. And those strategies are used to leverage a research-based curriculum out of Korn Ferry called Efficacy for Leaders of Color. And is really talking about what are those dispositions, what are those skills, what are the practices that get people of color from one place in your career to the next, with the ultimate goal being the achievement of entering into the C-suite. And so I am a fellow. I was a fellow in Columbus, Ohio. I was Cycle 11, which was a long time ago in our 25-year history. But when I moved to Charlotte and I saw that the organization was beginning to crystallized here, I wanted to be a part of it. And so I have the good fortune of serving on the board and looking forward to partner with these good folks in preparing the next generation of leaders here in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County.
Good morning. I'm Elizabeth McKee, and Leadership Charlotte is ending its 45th cohort. So we were founded in 1978. We've had about 2,200 leaders from Charlotte go through that cohort. In 2008, we started a short program geared towards newcomers but open to everybody called Encounter. And so we've had just under 1,000 people go through that program. So if you consider the scope of what we're trying to do, community knowledge, civic network, and service. And so in everything we do, whether it is the cohort, whether it's Encounter, whether it's our board of directors, whether it's our alumni, we have a staff member in the room with us. Shout out to Lakeisha Rios. We're looking at how do we increase community knowledge, how do we enhance and strengthen a civic network between people who would not otherwise necessarily meet one another, and then how do we give them opportunities to serve. Think about connecting and growing as adults. We don't often have those opportunities within our workplaces. So for Leadership Charlotte, how do we bring people together from very diverse backgrounds, whether they are a new leader, whether they've been a leader for a long time, how do we bring them together to strengthen the fabric of our community? That's what we're trying to do.
Great. Hello, Harold Rice here, founder of Black Social Capital Initiative, also known as BSI. You know how we are with our acronyms. Also, some of you may know me as the CEO of the Ada Jenkins Center. But how we started BSI, and you may see me look to the left because my co-pilot, Crystal, is also a part of BSI as well. So she has all the answers. But how we got started, there was a previous leader here in town, the United Way. And as he was leaving out of town, he told this large group of hundreds of people, he said, Charlotte, you have a problem with minority leadership in a not-for-profit space. And, you know, as I was a middle manager trying to climb that ladder, I found myself going through all kind of workshops that were really good for me, but I didn't have one that spoke to me as a Black person that said, what did leadership look like for me when I got there? And so it started really penetrating my heart about what does leadership look like in Charlotte for Black folk. And we brought, in 2017, right before the pandemic, 2018, we brought all the Black leaders that we could find who were leading organizations together. And that was the first time that they were all in a room at the same time. And it said that, you know, it was out of fear that they hadn't been in that room together, which was, you know, really interesting. And so from that moment, they helped us develop a curriculum of what things that they would have needed or have liked to have as they were coming through the ranks. And so we are going into our fourth year, our fourth cohort, and our goal is to really increase the Black pipeline when there's an opening in the not-for-profit space and leadership. How do you do that? Really, you got to talk to search firms. I didn't know anything about search firms back in the day. Coffee and conversations, understanding that executive interviewing is really, really different. It's really different. How to understand breaking down a budget, a strategic plan. Fundraising, you are the chief fundraiser. And what does fundraising look like for you as a Black person, right? I live in the Lake Norman area. I fundraise in the Lake Norman area. And what does it mean for me to go in someone's home and also perhaps have a Black development director? What does that look like? These are things that we have to really think through, unfortunately. The other sweet part about it is we have mentors. You know, as you are going through the cohort, you have a mentor. Shout out to Danielle. Danielle's a mentor for BSI. But it's really, really important for people who are in these seats have someone to really talk to help be a strategic partner. And that's what also BSI is about. It's also about leveraging the social capital piece, because what we were told anecdotally was three things. The reason why there's a lack of minority Black leadership specifically is Blacks lack the skills and talent, blacks are uninterested, and blacks lack the social capital. And I totally disagree with two of them, but the social capital part I could understand because, again, our job is about fundraising. So we are trying to increase that social capital piece, how to gain that. And lastly, we're finding out this is a place of belonging. People come to B-Side just to be, to belong, and it feels good. Those parking lot conversations you don't have to have in a parking lot. You can have in B-Side.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for still being awake. I know we're probably standing between you and lunch. So thank you all for hanging out with us. I'm Crystal Joy. I'm Managing Director of the Lee Institute. I was like, oh, what the, I don't know. Yeah, I need to talk to Kevin about getting a picture like Janine. That's what I need to do. That's why I need to do that. The American Leadership Forum is the flagship program for the Lee Institute. And so with American Leadership Forum, we are a national program. We run, the Lee Institute operates the Charlotte region chapter. We just commenced class 22. They affectionately call themselves Deuce Deuce. So we're now recruiting for class 23. I know I started that. So we are recruiting for class 23. Our focus is really on the region. So that kind of which separates us from some of the other programs is that it's Mecklenburg County, but it's the 13 county region. How are the things that we're doing as community leaders impacting not only the local community that we're sitting in right now, but what's happening in Chester, in York, in Lancaster, in South Carolina, what's happening in Iredell, what's happening in Barris, what's it look like in Anson County. So our program really focuses on taking leaders, diverse leaders from across the 13 county region, whatever that might look like, cross sector. It doesn't have to be just nonprofit. It can be corporate. We have folks from the hospitals. So whoever that is to come into the program and learn, one, about self. We focus a lot about who it is that you want to be as a leader. We do Strength Finder. So we do an assessment that talks about who are we, what's our strength, and how do we lead from strength. From those of us who participate in performance evaluations, the first thing we typically look at is what we didn't do well and we need to do better. We focus on what is it that you do well and how do you then create and look for people who do other things well so that you can create those diverse teams around you so that you can appreciate what you do and the gifts that you have. We also focus on then the group as a community. So say class 22, that was a community in itself. So building the community, how are you all connecting with each other? We have activities and things without spoiling it that go on between it within the team that creates this synergy, this connectedness between the members in that cohort so that they are creating their community over the course of the 10-month program. The next piece is then finally, you've looked inwardly at self, you've connected as a community and entity. Then how do we take this information and learn to give back into community? How are we practicing things that we're into using it as a test ground to say, hey, you know me, you know where my heart is. I'm gonna say something that might be crazy that I can't say anywhere else. How can maybe how should I say that back out into the larger community? So you can use it as a testing ground with people who now know more about you to then say, let me use this as the playing field and how I want to activate in community. One of the last things that we do in the program is ask you, what's your leadership statement? Over the course of this program, who is it that you want to be as a leader? And I say, how do you want to live your dash? What is that impact that you want to have in the course of your life where at the end that people are saying these things about you? What is it that you want said? And how do we now create a pathway for you to get there and be that type of leader? So that's what our focus really is about. Again, from a regional perspective, we've got, that's the Charlotte region. We are connected to 8 other chapters that are national, across the national network. So there are about 470 plus members in the regional network. Across the national network, there's more than 5,000. So you could reach out to Houston. We got called the mothership was out of Houston, Texas. Joseph Jaworski in 1980 is the founder of American Leadership Forum. He was a successful lawyer who was in different initiatives, who said that he found a problem with community and that it lacked real leadership. And what is it that we need to do to be real leaders in community? And looked for how did we lead more with heart. So he initiated the program in 1980, and then we kicked it off here with the Lee Institute in 1999.
Well, thank you, everyone, for those introductions. So I know you all are out there wondering, what in the world do I need to do to get connected? So my next question, somewhat twofold. So as employers in the room, but then also as team members, why should employers invest in leadership programs, and yours in particular? And we can start, and I'll come back to Janine, and we can go from there.
I'm not answering first next time, though, Danielle.
Okay, I'll switch it up.
All right. So why invest in leadership programs? North Carolina is changing right now. Charlotte is changing literally as we speak. There's probably, 60, I'm looking at the city folks, 60 to 160 people moving in right now. Our leadership development continuums have to match pace with the demographic changes and really the, to get a little academic, but the psychometrics of our community are changing so rapidly. And as that's changing, how are we keeping pace? And so, like I said, one of the reasons that I have been in this role for the last 2 years is that question of connecting leaders to community, that question of, well, then how are they impacting what's happening every day? How are they instituting change in ways that are ethical, in ways that are bound to reflect the larger demographics, in ways that are inclusive, in ways that promote belonging, because our community is constantly changing. You would have to be incredibly adaptive to do that. So part of the role and part of the pivot that CBI is making is developing a new program called LEC, which we have one alumni of in here. There you go, Saida. And really the goal was around, like, how do we create we lean into the spaces that are creating adaptive and ethical leaders. Right? So in this moment, as these changes are happening, as we're putting pressure on things like critical race theory, which most people don't know, as we are being constantly chastised for thinking about diversity and equity initiatives, even as our community is becoming more diverse, how do we have spaces that allow us to grow into our leadership capacity for that reason? How are we building our competency to build policies that can address that, but also the practices and behaviors that analyze what's happening in our bodies real time when we are actually put in those high conflict situations? So that's what we are doing. Investing in that kind of leadership change and leadership development, to me, is around creating the spaces for adaptivity to what's happening in our workforce. People are moving, people are working remote. The way team looks, the way leadership looks is very different than even 4 years ago, maybe even 4 minutes ago. So it behooves us to think about how do we create those adaptive capacities. We have been in partnership with, for almost 20 years, with all of our system level leaders, including education, healthcare, municipal and public sector, business leaders. Those leaders constantly pour back into CBI because we're pouring into their leaders. And so if we make this kind of pivot, we are looking for ways to expand that to include grassroots organizers, artists, and community members who are creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem that we typically don't highlight, because most of us can see some of the gaps in our own workforce development as those pivots are happening. And so we look for spaces where we can match the changes in real time.
I love that. And what I'll say to employers, and I'll speak specifically about us as an employer, is that historically, employers promote, but they don't create leaders. And so what usually happens is the people who are promoted into these leadership roles have to grow into their leadership discipline. And oftentimes that's a self-identified journey. With a lot of stop starts and failures. And what often happens is that employers who are putting people on that journey alone, they're not failure tolerant for when people do make the missteps on that leadership path. And so what leadership programs like these offer is, how do you help facilitate people on that journey, because you can't do it in-house. You have to outsource it. And so, and I think what's unique about all of these organizations is that they all have a different approach in how we all do it. And I think there's a virtue to that, because it's not a one-size-fits-all, and not one entity can serve all people on a leadership path. And so I think it's important for collaboration. It's important for thoughtful understanding for how we create and curate space. And I think it's also important that we help employers understand that the best way to develop efficacy of your leaders is to outsource that. because they have to interrogate what it means to be a leader inside and outside your space. And organizations like these help you do that because you have to think across difference and you have to think across discipline. And those things help to facilitate that learning in a very specific way. And so the one thing that I'll say about the African American Leadership Academy that is kind of a informal tagline of our work is that we believe in leading by design and not by default, meaning that you can't accidentally become a leader. You have to be very intentional about the skills that you need, the gaps that are expected, and identify the network of people that can help you close those gaps so that you can be the best leader that you can be, not only for yourself, but the teams that you lead as well.
I was writing down your tagline. So I'd like to say ditto in some ways. The thing that I would add to both Janine and Sean, outside of an organization, there's a greater opportunity to explore a brave space. I'm not going to say safe. It's not always safe, but when I look inside a Leadership Charlotte cohort in a group of people that have spent 10 months together, they have an opportunity to try on behaviors, to say I think you said the crazy thing, to say the thing outside the box that you don't want to say at work. And it's not fair to expect somebody to say that at work, right? So how do you promote as risk-free an environment as possible so that people can kind of fail and fail faster, maybe? That was a little bit of Robinson County coming out right there. Faster. Sorry. That's going to sound great on the video. You're welcome to edit it. So, that's kind of the whole point, right? Like, how do you... There's a box around me. I walked in here and you saw whatever you want to see, right? And that's kind of where we start with Leadership Charlotte. But the key is that Sean was somebody way before he got his title. I was somebody way before I got this title. How do you get to that person? Because at work, we kind of get trapped in the titles. So how do you get to the person that they were before the title? Because that's how you're going to start talking across differences. That's how you're going to be able to sorry, I keep hitting you. No, please. That's how you're going to be able to take a walk in somebody else's shoes and really create an understanding of someone else's human experience.
LC44, by the way, and so you can see why it's important.
Any more numbers? I saw the 10-minute sign, so I'll be quick. For us, investing in the programs is really essential. You're investing in people, and people won't always stay with you, right? But they will remember who invested in them, and they'll be able to take that with them forever. So, always invest in the people. The other thing, particular with BSI, although we've been in existence for 4 years, we've had 5 individuals come through our program who were able to get CEO roles. And that's through social capital. We were pledging underground is what we like to say. Because again, we didn't really have a major network. We were just using our local network. And that's made us all like a close-knit family, all the CEOs and everything. So that's the differentiator and why people should invest in us.
And what I love about everything that I've heard so far is that I ditto. I know, and just a quick shout out, senior fellows. I know Danielle's a senior fellow, Harold's a senior fellow.
Class of 17.
Yeah, okay. All right. Senior fellows, right? So, what I love though I'll talk to y'all too later. What I love though is that if you're noticing that we're all doing the different programs. So that's kind of as Sean was saying, that you start with one, you move to the next, and continuing to build on yourself. So what we keep saying is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. You start here and you move on to the next. With investing in ALF, the piece about ALF again is that we start off with self, and then we focus on the self part, and then again you move into the community piece of it. How are you now investing in taking that back? The people that we typically look for our program are those who want to better themselves. Hey, I'm a go-getter. I want to be in a leadership program. I want to go out here. What's the next leadership program I want to go to? Great. If you feel like you're too busy because you're, I'm a servant leader. I'm out here. I'm grinding. I'm on the pavement. You should be here too, because we also you need to figure out how do you also take care of yourself in that. And how are you leading to be a real, true servant leader if you're not taking care of yourself? What is it about you and how can you also, that self-care piece, we're starting to enter a mindfulness. So we're talking about mindfulness as well. So how are you also being a really good servant leader outside of that? Again, the regional piece, if you're looking to expand and you're like, hey, I love the Charlotte community, I love this local community, but I'm also looking at expanding my network regionally. Hey, I might want to go into Anson County, or I'm doing work in a space that requires me to be able to look outside of, then that's ALF. But again, all of these programs are absolutely amazing. I'm going to go tap y'all for some other stuff. I did Encounter. Been in the B-sides. Like I said, all of them are good and they're all interchangeable. It's just a matter of figuring out where you are in one place, at a particular place in your life or your career, and then which other ones, what that pipeline looks like for you.
Thank you all. I wrote down a lot of nuggets over here, so if you hear them again down the road, I'll give you credit, I promise. One of the things, Elizabeth, that you said, and again, class of 17 with ALF, and it really is about a brave space. Maybe not always safe, but it is a brave space, and it's an opportunity for you to almost unveil, right? You leave the titles where you are, and you're able to come in as self and really create an authentic an area, an environment, and that's what makes these programs so special. So we have 5 minutes. I'm going to ask one more question. You all have kind of talked about how it's not an either or. This is an and, right, for all these programs, and they complement each other. And so this is a workforce development summit. So can you answer what is the connection to community workforce, your program's connection to community workforce goals, and how does your program support workforce development? And so to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower. I am going to lead, or I'm going to follow Janine's orders, and she said she does not want to start first. So I'm going to let anyone take that question, and we'll kind of just go from there. I see people thinking. Sure. So how do your programs connect with community workforce goals, and how does your program support workforce development?
I don't know if our program connects directly with community workforce goals, other than providing increased income opportunities for individuals as they go to the next level, which will be life-changing for hopefully their family. And so that's our goal there, is to provide community workforce, I would say, in that regard.
And I agree with that in terms of the economic mobility aspect of it. What I also think is true is closing those disparity gaps when it comes to the C-suite rooms, and knowing that there's a massive underrepresentation for people of color, for women, for LGBTQ plus people, ensuring that we are really thinking about how do we create more space for people of different identity and lived experience into those leadership rooms. And then once those folks enter into those spaces, what skills do they need to be successful and to thrive once there? And so I think from our perspective, it's really about developing that efficacy for not only how you enhance your career trajectory, but also how do you provide and add value to the organization once you're in those positions to unlock doors and make room for others. And so we always talk about holding and maintaining space, but then also creating and saving space. And that's one thing that's important about those workforce development goals, is that you don't see it as not only an individual journey, but one that is a contribution to how we as a community, as a society, can unlock doors that were once locked for others. And so that's one thing that we are very cognizant of and try to be intentional about.
I'll hop in. I don't know that ours tied directly either, outside of information and access. So we will talk from a regional perspective about, hey, what do things look like here in Charlotte, in the Mecklenburg County? But again, because it's a regional program, we talk about what that also looks like for workforce and transportation and accessibility to jobs from a perspective of how do people in, what does Anson County look like? What does Iredell County look like? What is Lancaster, Chester? What do those communities look like? And what is that, what leans into the reason that those communities are shaped the way that they are? As community leaders, how are we then making decisions about what needs to happen in our community and other communities to make sure that we're creating spaces for accessibility for those other communities? In Anson County, if there's not a direct tie to transportation, then it's hard to get a job because those communities are dying out. And so if you don't have people that are going back into those communities, and we're talking about that in these programs, and we talk about what the history of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg region looks like and what those transportation lines look like. So as we're making decisions, we're creating opportunities for people to understand what the history is, and so that we can make better decisions or different decisions moving forward so that people do have that accessibility.
Elizabeth, okay.
Super quick.
Yep, go ahead.
I would say that maybe not explicitly, but there is a expectation that the people in your cohort you're going to help take care of. And that social capital goes beyond a personal thing. It goes into networking in terms of business, and maybe not a direct correlation with the workforce goals, but the outcome of it is, what are the connections? I sat out in the hallway, I saw Henry Rock, I saw Christine Edwards, I saw Betsy Conway, and I saw Jennifer DeWitt. Well, all Leadership Charlotte alum, connected all of them, and all in different classes. But what does that mean longer term in terms of making those connections and who you're going to bring along with you? Because that is an expectation. Is that a fair thing?
I'm going to add super quick because I apparently have 30 seconds. Y'all look around the room real quick. How many young people do you see in this room? How are we fostering leadership and multi-generational support? Because if our workforce development is focused on the leaders that we have currently in the room, and we only have, when I say young people, I mean 20 to 25. I know, some of us are like, well, but we can acknowledge that we have digital inclusion aspects. We can acknowledge that we have social capital limitations. We can acknowledge that our hiring practices are not matching, and that maybe even the pipeline doesn't match what we need. So as we're doing this, we've got to think about the multi-generational impact, and that would be really the aha moment that I hope we all have in here, is that if we're not doing this very intentionally and multi-generationally, we are going to cap our own progress.
Thank you all so much for that. So yes, we are now at the Q&A session. And we have our first hand. Can we get?
Thank you. My name is Danielle. So going off of what you just said, being a young person in the room, right in that age gap, age range that you said, how early is too early to get involved in these leadership development? How do you start? How do you know where to start?
That's a good question.
Kind of, you can't necessarily anticipate 10 years down the line. So.
Well, you're in the right space, number one, which is why I was really hopeful I was going to see a gang of high school students here. Not a literal gang, but But you're in the right space. I literally was just on a panel yesterday for Davidson College. They are putting a group of aspiring nonprofit leaders into nonprofit internships right now. So we have some educational, so I was talking about education, but we have some educational institutions that are very intentionally creating internships and mentorship. But then you might already be in a workforce situation where you're already involved in a career, you already have a sense of where you want to go. I think getting knowledge of all the different aspects is really important because most of the time your organization can sponsor your participation in these kinds of experiences if you can bring it to their attention. And it's not ever too early to start. If you have a mindset of what you think your career trajectory is going to be and how you might impact. All of us are talking about the role that we play in connecting to each other, but also the role that we play in creating the Charlotte that is equitable, right? So if we are trying to create a Charlotte that's equitable, I started my career in a classroom, a public school classroom on the other side of Charlotte. And so, but to somebody's point earlier, you have to pour into people, you have to invest in people, and you will find the people who can help you get plugged into these programs. But please reach out to all of us because that's the first step. Finding it and then getting back to your organization will be the next.
Can I add something to that? So, and you are in the exactly right room. And I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, because one thing, the earlier you recognize it, the better you'll be about solving for it, is recognizing that your career is on two tracks, the promotion track and the leadership track. And the sooner you get clear about which track you're on and which one you need to remedy and nurture and support, the sooner you're going to bring those things into synchronicity and they become the same thing. Because currently they will remain separate and you'll feel like you're promoting but you're not leading. And that is something that you need to bring into continuity. And once you get clear on that and what discipline you need to make those things the same, then you'll really have a trajectory that's going to lead you to excellent places.
Did anyone else want to add to that, or? Okay. Awesome. All right, we got a question in the back.
Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica. Thank you for your time. My question is, as the workforce is constantly being reimagined, how do you all reimagine leadership, and how are your efforts in elevating leadership remaining relevant and transformative?
I'll start that in terms of just being reflective, and I'm sorry, is that one of the most important skills that we try to foster in the African American Leadership Academy is being responsive in the presence of difference. And as a leader, being responsive in the presence of difference is recognizing the skills and dispositions of your teams and what skills and dispositions do you need to own in order to be responsive to them. So an example of that for me is that I'm taking Spanish. I need to become multilingual in order to lead in this space because because it's important, right? And because I'm recognizing who my constituents are, and I'm recognizing if I want to be a strong leader, understanding the dynamics that are shifting in my constituency, then there are skill gaps that I've identified in my leadership track that tells me I need to close them up. And so instead of going off and getting a PhD, a JD, nothing against that, I'm going to get fluent in Spanish because that's what's more important to me.
As a person who is going to get their PhD, LaShawn. Okay, I just feel like I had to respond. But Veronica, you're asking a really good question. So, he said he's learning Spanish. I am very intentionally expanding my own reach, but also thinking about like this digital inclusion piece is a wave that we have all need to be paying attention to. And so staying at the forefront of your own digital competence and digital literacy is absolutely, that is fundamental to what's gonna happen in the future. But also we have to, as a community, we have to promote digital equity because the access to leadership and creating an ecosystem where we all thrive is fundamental to leadership. Because if we're all struggling, it doesn't matter whether you're a really out there leader, who cares? We're struggling, right? So if we have to have kind of the connection between what's happening. And so I often talk about context, collaboration, connection, and commitment. And so we're building out our accountability metrics in real time to create the context, to examine the context and be responsive, just like LaShawn said.
Just real quick, just to kind of add on to what they were saying already, that digital piece is extremely, extremely important. Using that senior fellow network we talked about, what we also do is within our network, we have expertise, but we also use our network to find others who have expertise in figuring out what's going on in the community. And we have sessions in addition to, after you, great, but we create a senior fellow network of additional learning. So we bring people back either virtually, in person. We have national conversations. One of the most recent ones that we did which was really big, we're gonna try to figure out how we expand on it, is talking about AI and what does that mean for leadership? What does that mean for jobs? What does that mean for, I go to Bojangles is not healthy. Bojangles is using AI at the drive-through. So what is that for leaders, again, as we're talking about how we're workforce development, what does that mean in the space of workforce development, and as leaders, how are we now addressing that, and how are we looking at those types of things differently? So trying to figure out what is happening in community and bringing us together to really have those conversations about what that looks like, how it impacts us as leaders, our people that we are leading, so that we know how to now move things forward, but just trying to stay on the pulse of things that are going on and using community to do that.
The OG here. So yes, 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 and yes. And please, please, please don't ever forget that there will always be a huge need to be able to listen effectively, to be able to meet another human being where they are, because we're not going to be just on Zoom. So we have to have this. We have to have this as a society and a culture. That ability to embrace difference, embrace inclusiveness, the ability to show up and be authentic as yourself. And at the very heart, this is my personal, this is not Leadership Charlotte. If you are honest and sincere in everything that you do, you're not going to fail. You might hit obstacles, you might hit roadblocks, but the mark of a true leader of being able to stand up and be authentic and be honest and sincere and accountable for everything that you do, you can take it to the bank. That's not the same for all people, I get that. And yet, it still has to be. Did you want?
So yes, 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 right. But I will add, even though the workforce could change and may change and will change, I think it's important to have a mentor as well. I myself have a mentor, right? I think that is important. In whatever journey you're going, have someone that you can trust, who can hold you accountable and be truthful to you. So regardless of how things change, find a great mentor.
Thank you. I have a mentor too, and a coach, and a counselor. Thank you all so much. We can't take any more. I'm sorry it was cut, but hopefully you all will remain to catch a couple of questions. But if you all would join me, please give this panel a round of applause for such a rich conversation. And thank you all so much. And I think we are now going to lunch.